So I find myself in very uncomfortable company here with these two people to my left. First one being Ted Bundy. Below that is Jeffrey Dahmer, two infamous serial killers. This is a very interesting chapter. Still very, very uncomfortable seeing those guys next to me. But anyways, let me click out and get me off this page so I'm not confused with those two guys. Chapter 4, we're talking about psychopathy. The question there, when you think of a psychopath or the word psychopathy, what images come to mind? Hopefully it wasn't mine. These two guys definitely are a couple that people think of. It goes on to say, is it your lying, cheating ex-husband, your sadistic high school gym teacher, your boss who loves to humiliate you and humiliate people in meetings, or the colleague who stole your idea and passed it off as his or her own? It could be all of these things, y'all. When we're talking about psychopathy, yeah, the infamous people get mentioned and their pictures come up, but the book on the right there, The Sociopath Next Door, which I highly recommend. If you guys have an interest in psychopathy, Martha Stout has done extensive research. She spent her career's been dedicated. She's a Harvard psychologist who's studied psychopaths and just psychopathy in general, sociopathic behavior and antisocial personality disordered folks for a long time. And she makes claims that, as it says there in the front, 1 in 25 ordinary Americans secretly has no conscience, can do anything at all without feeling guilty. That means hence the name of the book, The Sociopath Next Door. You know somebody that's a sociopath. So we'll talk a little bit about that, what goes into the psyche or the psychological development of that, and then how we deal with that in the court system a little bit. Psychopaths may truly interact in all aspects of our society, according to Robert Hare. We'll talk about Robert Hare a little bit. The psychopathy checklist, the PCL, developed by Robert Hare. You can see a picture of him there. Very famous, one of the first things that we turn to, still look at today. Since Robert Hare is one of the foremost experts on modern psychopathy, author of the most frequently used measure of psychopathy, the Psychopathy Checklist, revised. We still look at this checklist. We use it to try to determine if people meet criteria or match up with elements of having psychopathy within their psychological makeup. The PLC, or rather the PCL, PCLR, give the field a common description and method for assessing psychopathy. Not only measure available, but it is the standard that we use today. Still turn to his work. If you look here, it talks about how the psychopathy checklist kind of rates people. It's a 20-item rating scale. It gives 3 points. 0 for absence of this, 1 for possibility, 2 for definitely exhibiting by examinee. And then you can see the range of the scores from 0 to 40. 30 plus is considered conservative cutoff for psychopathy. Generally used as categorical variable. It says either you are not a psychopath, you're under 30, or you score 30 and up and you are considered a psychopath. Also used as a continuous variable. In other words, the higher the score, the more we're going to find within that personality, within that psyche. Requires clinical expert judgment. It does. So there's some debate in forensic psychology as to whether psychopathy is the best understood as a categorical construct or whether it should be thought of as a continuous score. A lot of people want to say, if you're in sort of right at the cutoff range and you're 30, 31, 32, or just under, how likely are you to act out on some of these traits? Or is it contained? We'll discuss that a little bit. Here's some of the characteristics or some of the things we look at. It says 8 items, often labeled as interpersonal or affective, which is emotional factors, composed of its items largely they're related to interpersonal behavior and emotional expression within relationships and within conversations. Glibness, superficial charm. People with psychopathy often can show, they can be very charismatic, they can be very charming. Grandiose sense of self-worth. Yes, believe that they're above other people. They kind of look down on other people. They inwardly criticize and put down other people, sometimes outwardly too, but they carry themselves in this grandiose fashion that almost like a narcissist, you guys. I'm God's gift to this world idea. Pathological lying, they constantly, but they're calculated and they know they're lying to you guys. It's not a compulsive liar. It would be somebody who lies and then can't remember their lies, or they lie because they can't help it. It's impulsive. No, they're very calculated with their lying. They do it on a regular basis, but they do it for that second bullet point there, or the one below it, the conning, manipulative aspect. Yes, highly manipulative, and that's where the lying comes into play. And they remember their web of lies. They don't lose track of it. Lack of remorse or guilt is probably one of the biggest ones there. Don't show feelings or empathy towards other people. They can't feel your pain. They can't step into your pain. They can fake like they do, and they're very good at fooling people by showing fake remorse or fake guilt. Shallow affect, you guys, meaning they can't go into deep emotions. They don't understand love. They don't understand what it's like to really care for somebody else, or what it's like to grieve for somebody else, because it's foreign to them. It doesn't process. Shallow affect, callous or lack of empathy, the things we're talking about here. Failure to accept responsibility for their own actions. They externalize blame other places. They don't internalize it. They don't learn from their mistakes. They don't take responsibility. They don't own up. The PLCR factor 2, this is labeled socially deviant antisocial lifestyle factor and consists of behaviorally based items. Need for stimulation, proneness to boredom. They get bored very easily, so they're looking to, again, stimulate their brains, stimulate some functioning cognitively, emotionally. So they seek out deviant things, or they seek out behavior that's going to lead to that. Parasitic lifestyle, poor behavioral controls, early behavioral problems, lack of realistic long-term goals. Impulsivity is always a big part of it. Irresponsible, juvenile delinquency. These are some things we look to, or some signs of it, I guess you could say. Additional PCL are items: promiscuous sexual behavior, often conquest, often power control based, many short-term marital relationships. They don't last in those kind of relationships. They tend to have quite a few. Criminal versatility, meaning different elements, different areas they dabble in that are usually outside what the law allows for. But they're good at it. They get away with it often. Types of psychopathy. The primary psychopathy, we call this the prototypical psychopathy, commits antisocial acts. When we say antisocial, you guys, it's not, has nothing to do with social, comfortable people, not comfortable people. We're just saying it's not pro-social. It's not beneficial for relationships. It's antisocial in that it's not conducive. It's not adaptive. Irresponsible, lacks empathy, and is superficially charming because of some inherent deficit. The secondary psychopathy, not inherent. Cause lies in factors such as low intelligence or some sort of social disadvantage or impulsivity driven by anxiety. These people feel stuff. They're either, like I said, low intellectual functioning that doesn't allow them to kind of think through things at a deep level, more enhanced level. Impulsivity driven by anxiety. They feel anxiety. They feel worriness. They actively, usually impulsively act on that. The primary psychopathy, you guys, don't feel anxiety. And if you look there, key distinction is presence of anxiety in secondary psychopathy. Secondary psychopath commits antisocial behavior out of impulsivity that's driven by anxiety or worry or concern. The true psychopath commits violence and antisocial behavior repetitively without conscience. No, they don't have anxiety. Okay, antisocial personality disorder, which we call APD, and psychopathy, some of the differences, you guys. In the DSM, actually, that's the old DSM. Even in the new DSM, the DSM-5, which is what we use in psychiatry today, it says it's listed formally, but the characteristics that comprise psychopathy are listed under associated features. And still, in the new DSM-5, I believe to be the same situation. With antisocial personality disorder, diagnostic criteria are more behavioral. Objective behaviors like we look at lying, cheating, stealing. While with psychopathy, not defined only in behavioral terms, the criteria are behavioral, also interpersonal affective, within the context of relationships and within how they show emotion or don't show emotion, or to what level As we mentioned before, they don't go to deeper emotion. They get very confused by that. I remember I was a big Dexter fan, so I watched all seasons of that. And I know it's a fictional depiction, but it really steps inside psychopathy in an interesting kind of way. And I remember him, you always hear his thoughts played out on screen as you watch the show, and he would discuss deeper emotion and his lack of understanding of that. When he wants to have normal relationships, he wants to feel love, but he's confused by it. Intimacy throws him off. He doesn't really and that kind of goes for your typical psychopath or sociopath. They really don't. They pretend as if they do, but they don't. So as a result, the diagnosis of psychopathy is narrower and more specific than antisocial personality disorder. Some people see it as a continuum. They say, it kind of starts out with antisocial personality disorder symptoms and then eventually evolves into what we would consider to be sociopathic or psychopathy. And then there's some people, experts as well, that see it as the same thing. They see antisocial personality and psychopathy as synonymous. So it kind of depends on the source, where you look, where you ask. Antisocial personality disorder, it says APD often criticizes the diagnosis among offenders because it has little meaning when most offenders can be diagnosed with a disorder. The majority of people in the criminal justice system are diagnosed with personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder. So how do we separate the sociopaths, psychopaths from those folks? It says not all people who suffer from psychopathy also suffer from APD. About 90% do, though, so that's a huge percentage. Only maybe 10% don't. And about 15 to 30% of those with APD suffer from psychopathy. So you see the stats kind of try to differentiate, but still don't really do a great job of that. Successful psychopaths, individuals who do not suffer from APD, they are not incarcerated and tend to exhibit higher intelligence, are more educated, and are from higher socioeconomic standing than most psychopaths. And you can see this, the book, Snakes in Suits, When Psychopaths Go to Work. It gives out a lot of information about, they speculate that a lot of high-power people probably show sociopathic tendencies, behaviors. Michael Douglas' Wall Street, that was the original Wall Street. I know they made a remake of it, but his character, Greco, was ruthless, and they show his psychopathic tendencies in whatever it takes for power, control, money, etc. So very few studies have attempted to assess non-institutionalized psychopaths outside of college samples. We haven't gathered enough information, you guys. We haven't done enough research. I think Canada actually is one of the places we pull a lot of information about sociopaths and psychopaths. Apparently there's a lot of psychopaths in Canada. No, I don't think that's the case. It's just they've, for whatever reasons, done more research than we have. We borrow a lot of their information, but it's kind of hard to generalize it onto American populations. Many of their conclusions are not based on empirical studies, but are purely anecdotal. Only future research will really tell us whether psychopathic individuals are truly as widespread as they suggest. And, sociopath next door, Martha Stout, she believes they are. She believes they're your neighbors. They're the people that you come in contact with, the people you sit next to in classes, your supervisor, your boss, it could be anybody. So, again, it's something that we need to find more research on, and very difficult to get at, though. The alternative three-factor model, a little bit different. Cook and Mitchie in 2001 says items from factor 2 strictly related to antisocial behavior, criminal versatility, juvenile delinquency. Also, remaining items are divided into these three different areas: arrogant, deceitful, interpersonal style, deficient affective experience, and impulsive, irresponsible behavior style. They look at those three categories. Reduced emphasis on criminal behavior. And not as much when we look at this factor, or this factor model. It says some have argued that our inclusion of criminal behavior as a core part of psychopathy may be related to the fact that the PCLR was developed and primarily used in the criminal population for the past 30 years. So again, to generalize that onto the regular population, non-institutionalized population, there's some struggles with doing that. Just keep that in mind.